What's up, everyone? John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo here with a full review of one of the latest smartphones to grace AT&T's lineup. This is the sequel to the original dual-core phone on AT&T, the Motorola Atrix 2. Let's see if it lives up to the heritage, the name, and does Android proud. Alright, so first let me run through the specs of this guy with you. The most important thing you have to know is that it is $100 on a 2-year contract, representing a pretty significant value here. It's running Android 2.3 Gingerbread. It's being powered by a TI OMAP 1 GHz dual-core processor, a gig of RAM. It's got a 4.3-inch QHD screen with a resolution of 540 by 960, 8-megapixel camera on the back that can shoot video at 1080p, and then a VGA camera that lives on the front, and it is HSPA Plus compatible with a battery of 1,785 milliamp hours. Alright, so we got the specs out of the way. I start all my phone reviews with talking about call quality. I always give the same caveat. If it's not going to make good phone calls, it's not going to be that much use to you. And the Atrix 2 made very good phone calls. Call quality was excellent. It didn't have any dropped calls in my 20-call test. It worked pretty well when I was using it. Speakerphone was relatively loud. And I got a couple questions about why I mentioned speakerphone in my video reviews. We have a lot of hearing impaired folks in our audience that speakerphone is very important to. And a lot of folks rely on speakerphone whether they're in the car or in a conference room. This guy right here, he loves his speakerphone. I didn't have any white noise or popping on mine, and the caller didn't have any on theirs. So, not going to be a problem here. One point of notice, though, it does say 4G up there. This is not an LTE-capable device, just HSPA+. And we'll talk about that in a few more minutes. All right, I want to talk about the build quality, too, of this phone. Motorola's been hit or miss with their build quality. This one is one of the hits. Build quality is pretty outstanding with the Atrix 2. The back is sort of a textured, soft-touch rubber. You can always tell when a phone is built nicely when there's not a gap between the back plate and the battery. When you have that gap, it makes it feel almost hollow, and when you tap it, you can feel the back pushing in. This one sits very flush. There's a pretty nice feel to it. It definitely looks more premium than the price is going to represent. It's got a nice chrome accents along the side, and I didn't have any dings as well with this, which is quite nice, and not any screen scratches with the Gorilla Glass screen. So build quality is pretty outstanding for Motorola, and I thought I'd make a point to bring that up. All right, so let's talk about speed. Everybody wants to know about speed. Keep in mind that this is a $100 phone, and despite its sort of diminutive price, it does compete pretty nicely with much higher priced phones. I got a quadrant score of 2193. Quadrant might not always be the most reliable test, but it's what I use consistently in all my devices. So you can see, pretty nice score. This is a stock ROM. If you want to go through and try and put a custom ROM on here, certainly you can get that score up. But it is a pretty zippy phone. I didn't have any problem launching applications, whether I was launching Gallery or the camera. Things did launch pretty quick. I didn't have any issue with memory management. I didn't have to go in and manually close programs. Things just tend to open when I needed them to, which was pretty nice. And I didn't have any slowdown as well. Even with widgets running, or a lot of widgets on the home screen, there was no slowdown whatsoever here. This is a pretty zippy phone. Gig of RAM, dual-core processor, Android 2.3. Really going to be in a nice position. All right, so now let's talk about some of the OS tweaks here. This is not stock Gingerbread. You've got Motorola's UI on top that used to be called MotoBlur. And if you watch my videos before, you'll know I hate MotoBlur. Well, they've de-MotoBlurred this up, and there's a lot of unique things in here. So let's go ahead and start with the launcher. So first, unlike standard Gingerbread, you've got horizontal scrolling for your applications that have a sort of 3D-esque effect to it. It's not a 3D phone, but as you move these around, you can see it sort of gives you a faux 3D look to it. You've got some new groups here up at the top, which are kind of neat. If you go ahead and select that in the upper left-hand corner, you go ahead and group your applications by any category you like, and you can create new ones hitting that plus button. Go ahead and back out of this. When you want to move icons around, go ahead and select it. You get sort of a grid. You can see where the plus is. You can move it to where you want. Very similar to what we have on Honeycomb and what we'll have soon on Ice Cream Sandwich. I don't know why I found that kind of neat. It was a little touch that I appreciated. You also have a ton of widgets that are custom to Motorola. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what those are. So we'll go ahead and jump into widgets. You can see you've got Bluetooth toggle, some analog clock, email, Google search. Some of these are standard Android, some of these are custom to Motorola. The original Moto Blur really did an awful job of trying to tie in social media to kind of aggregate all your contents. This one does a much less offensive job of it, and some of the widgets can be surprisingly useful. One of the other tweaks that you're going to get with this is a new keyboard. Let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. We'll jump into text messaging here. And the keyboard was generally one of the things that I used to like about the initial Moto Blur. Go ahead and see it right there. I found it to be very difficult to use, actually, on the Atrix 2. But one of the nice things about Android is you can customize your keyboard. But if you're not into customization or you don't know how when you do use a stock keyboard, I found this one to be a little bit cramped and just not be that responsive, even when I had it in landscape orientation. However, because it's Android, you've got a speech-to-text functionality, which works very, very well. So you can almost never even have to use a keyboard. Go ahead and hit that button, and it'll go ahead and tell you what you need to do. I'll give you a quick example of that. This is a test of the keyboard on the Motorola Atrix. This is a test of the keyboard on the Motorola Atrix. It's funny, it didn't even know its own name, but it's understandable. You could translate Atrix to Atrix. But it does work pretty decently. So we'll go ahead and exit out of that and hit home. Let's talk a bit about the browser. Browser is extremely important to me. I find this browser icon to be a bit annoying with the big AT&T logo. Certainly you can swap that with some launchers in there. Browser works about as well as you'd expect with a modern Android browser, meaning very well. Flash content when you have it loaded very quickly. I didn't have any issue. While doing my quick scrolling, I didn't have any checkerboard pattern, which you wouldn't expect from a dual-core phone with a gig of RAM. Things just worked very nicely when you're going through and using them. All right, so while we're here, let's go ahead and talk about the screen. It is QHD in 4.3 inches. So that means it got a resolution of 540 by 960. So text does look very crisp and clear. In direct sunlight, though, it's going to be extremely washed out and almost impossible to see. Something to keep in mind with Super AMOLED Plus panels. You have much more direct visibility in direct sunlight. And you can see it here. The white in the background wasn't as white and as crisp as I would like. Text doesn't have any pixelization at all. The display itself just isn't very bright and vibrant, unfortunately. So go ahead and jump to gallery and I'll show you some images that I took. We'll go ahead and check out my library. In fact, I'll just show you one image that I took. Here is my Android guy that made a bit of a cameo. Sort of an example of the camera as well. This was taken with the camera from the Motorola Atrix 2, which is an 8-megapixel sensor. Images look fine. They're not outstanding, but they're not overly great. As you zoom in, obviously, you're going to get some pixelization. But the screen just didn't pop when I compare it to other Android devices I've tested. But those are much more expensive Android devices. So for $100, you really are getting a pretty nice package in here. So we are living now in a ice cream sandwich world. It's been announced, and it's tough to look at any Android device now that we know what ice cream sandwich is going to bring. And what it's going to bring is a whole dose of awesome. So I've got a hard time recommending taking a bite of gingerbread when you can take a scoop of ice cream sandwich if you just wait a month or so. But if you're looking to get a phone now and you're looking to get a budget phone that you still want to have a really decent specs for $100, the Atrix 2 is going to be a very, very hard phone to beat. A few of the flaws, certainly not having an ice cream sandwich. Motorola hasn't said whether or not it's going to be coming to the Atrix 2. Presumably at some point it will. It is not an LTE device, unfortunately. AT&T is aggressively rolling out their LTE network. So if you're in an area that might be getting that LTE sometime in the next 2 years of the duration of your contract, you certainly are going to feel a bit left behind. The HSPA Plus is quick depending on where you are. Where I am, I do not even come close to getting true HSPA Plus speeds. Generally, I can average on a good day 2 megabits per second down. You do have access to all of the dock functionalities that the original Atrix had. You can plug it into a laptop dock. You can use a HD dock to connect it to your TV. You do get a ton of options. here, and you take advantage of that HDMI out port right there. So you are getting a huge bang for your buck. If you want to get the best value, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a phone that's better value than the Motorola Atrix 2. If you want to have the latest and greatest, however, I recommend waiting. If you just want a phone that's going to work and work well and serve you over the next 2 years, the Atrix 2 is probably going to be a very good choice for you. It's available now from AT&T, and if you want to avoid that 2-year contract, it's going to set you back just about $450. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I am John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo with a full review for you of the Motorola Atrix 2 for AT&T. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.